can't play PBL Chessy because it's copyrighted. Dang it.
All right, welcome to Smash University. We're back here at it again. Charles, Bam, Ramses, and Tony. We are going to get into our topic today, which is Spargo and Cloud. Now, disclaimer: before we get into this, I already know there's gonna be a bunch of people. Man, you guys thought Cloud sucked. Blah blah blah. I will argue that Cloud is one of, if not the most buffed character in this game, and like
That's
the
so
buffs
true.
they gave to Cloud were extraordinary, like absolutely wild in my opinion. They buffed a lot of his core mechanics, like something like up smash being faster and like how strong that move is, right? How fast limit charges, his ledge snap, like these are all like very, cause like when you buff Incineroar, right? And like, oh, Incineroar's side B kills earlier, like it's like, well, does that
Sure.
right? Okay, like that does, you're not like fixing his weaknesses. Like making a character's strength stronger is like nice, but like that's not the reason why Incineroar sucks. It's not because his side B doesn't rob your stock early enough, right? But like Cloud's ledge snap getting buffed was like huge. So many characters two framed him for free. Like I remember Wolf month 1 of Ultimate. That was the freest two frame. Like you just down tilt, F tilt, character's done, no jump, right? So like in terms of like the amount of sheer buffs he got, and then the buffs that like happened, or like just the core mechanics and you know how effective those buffs were, I think were crazy. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about Cloud like pre-buff first. I don't know if that's how you guys want to like talk about, like open things up with, you know, I like we could talk about like the Smash 4 transition into early Ultimate and kind of like set up the storyline of the character. I feel like that's something we've done in this podcast quite a bit. Like when we talk about a character, it's like giving like that base level storyline, right?
Yeah, sure. We can go about it that way. I honestly think there's not a lot to say about Cloud pre-buff because there were almost no Clouds.
Spargo?
That's so true.
Yeah, the Spargo. I mean,
so true.
almost no Clouds, but
Cola.
Spargo and Cola were
Spargo,
the
yeah.
main ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I saw it is like what you could really see at the beginning of Ultimate is that the characters that were either similar to Smash 4 or just simple and strong, like something like Inkling, or you know similar to Smash 4 like Cloud, they did like really well at the start of Ultimate. And then as people kind of figure out the other characters, it kind of, you know, they got a little bit weaker. And then eventually it's kind of, you know, the buffs came in, and that's where we saw really the resurgence of Cloud. And like I might be oversimplifying because I'll be honest, like at the beginning of Ultimate I was like very focused on Europe, and Europe didn't really have a lot of Cloud representation. So I'm actually curious to see like what you guys have to say about that like pre-buff era of Cloud in the US.
I think that at least on my end, Tony, you can go into it afterwards too. But I think on my end, just kind of really similar to what Charles was saying. Like the character was just getting like edgeguarded, like Kingdom Come, like two frames were just super easy on the character. I think especially at the time too, a lot of people were putting value into some of these like early characters that were just like we're just doing more damage, right? They're doing like far more damage than Cloud was. I think a lot of people were just didn't value like some of the things that he have. Like they didn't value a lot of his like his normals and his aerials as much at the time too, because we had a lot more characters just in the even like in the base roster. Like we just had more characters that had more ranged options, right? And we continued to get characters with these kind of like ranges. So people didn't see, they're like, oh man, well you have this huge disjoint. It's like, well, guess what? Now there's a billion characters with disjoints, right? So it's like so people just didn't see as much value in that. So I think that a lot of it was like partly part of that, but then honestly people weren't playing him as much, period, because you had this whole idea of, well, he's not Smash 4 Cloud, therefore he sucks, right? We saw that for a ton of characters. We saw that for
Bayo.
Cloud is a big one. Obviously we saw that for Sonic, that was a big one, which is stupid as hell. You know, even for like Game Watch and some other characters too, where it was like this big idea where like these characters are complete trash. Because why? Because They can't
not as
smash
good.
4. If they
Yeah.
can't smash 4, they clearly must be bad. So I feel like he suffered a lot from that, and then people just had an overall interest in some of these other characters that were coming out at the time that seemed just to do more, right? They seem to do just more damage, just like said, like similar disjoints, and so people just didn't really play the character as much. You know, obviously, you're saying Spargo was still like playing him, like saw 1AK, like Cola was playing as well. Like you had some like few notables here and there, but I think on average we just didn't see like on the high to top level we still didn't see that too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that most of the Smash 4 carryover into Ultimate for Cloud was mainly the rising stars who stayed with him. The top Smash 4 Clouds in general, I'm pretty sure dropped the character across the board. Not necessarily because they didn't like him anymore, just because they wanted to explore other variations of the character like Leo, Tweak. They were just more interested in the new characters added to the game.
Exactly.
It was less an indictment of Cloud's weakness as a character and more on just he had been a thoroughly explored character for the last 2 years, and people were just looking at other interests. And so, like here in the Southeast in particular, we have more mid-level Clouds. Like we have Diabeo in Florida, we have Nico down in Texas. The Cola never really stopped with him, but one of the most common complaints I recall with the character is that he just couldn't kill. Like he had that Sheik syndrome where you would just be absolutely obliterating someone. They're at like 150 and then you die from 0% because somebody would just combo you off and 2-frame you or do whatever limitation Cloud has, and they would just catch you. One of the first innovations I recall of the character is that people realize, you know what, back air is safe. I can swing back air and you can't beat it, and then I can play around you playing around my back air and hit you for that with my anti-air. And then people started to figure out, oh hey, my anti-air is also combo now. And so like people didn't realize Cloud's up tilt was actually a very good move right off the bat. And then now, of course, we know it's basically like a Fox up tilt with disjoint. But like these steady evolutions, like them overall increasing, I'd say the average damage output of what Cloud's moves do, along with making them string together better. I'd say that Cloud is more of a rebalanced character rather than a directly nerfed character, although he is worse. It's mostly because the rest of the cast is better, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, again, going back to what you were saying for Charles too, like his buffs were like absolutely insane. Overall, right? Like it's like, dude, being like you were just talking about right now, like him having trouble killing, right? But we know that dash attack got buffed like significantly, like to be actual kill option, right? And it's like up smash out of shield getting better. Again, you already talked about the Clem Hazard and stuff as well. Just even how they went about in terms of the limit gauge too. So it's like being in a space where it's like you're going to have a more of a occurrence of that coming out, right? And I think in tandem with how people got better with like understanding how like valuable lead trapping all stuff can be in this game with those kind of situations as well, like we saw additional value with them there, where it's like, dude, obviously the checkmate scenarios that we see all the time. It's like, oh, I'm Cloud, I'm gonna hold shield now and at the ledge, and if I have a limit at the time, then it's like, you have to do anything, I'm pretty much can just come at it and like see you in another life, right? So there's just a lot of those things, like a lot of the rebalancing that Tony was talking about, and then for him to actually get buffs like in those spaces now, we're able to really like kind of remove a lot of the initial like follies that we saw in Cloud. And again, a lot of it was really just people kind of coming back to the character and like reevaluating the character now that they understood Ultimate more, and being like, hey, the character got better, and actually the character wasn't as bad as I initially thought. I just wasn't playing the character exactly to the game's global mechanics, right?
I think the character was globally from the Smash community underrated. I think we just had our Smash 4 goggles on, right? And one move stayed the same though. It was back air, and I think that move in itself was tremendously overlooked. Fun fact: the very first MSM for Ultimate was won by Cloud. It was Tyrant playing Cloud. Tyrant is actually someone that I love to talk to the game about. He has a very great mind for the game. He was a top player in Brawl for SoCal, playing Meta Knight. So he just knows Smash really well. And I remember at that first MSM, I sat down, I talked with him for like 30 minutes for an hour. We were just talking about Ultimate, really trying to figure the game out, right? It was a very exciting time back then. And he was just like, yeah, I'm just playing Cloud. I'm just back airing everyone's shield. Like, it's great. And he also he also talked about how strong he felt Rob was. He's like, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like Rob's really good in this game. I feel like projectiles in general are very good because of the parry system and how perfect shield's out of the question now. And it's crazy how much of the things that Tyrant thought about the game week 1, by the way, were absolutely correct. So it's to me, again, someone I respect a lot in terms of just as a person, and especially his outlook on the game. So it's so crazy to me because like he won that first MSM with Cloud and just talked about Rob and stuff like that. And that one move back air is just that good, right? We see Spargo. If you count how much time Spargo with back airs with Cloud, you'll be surprised. it's crazy. That move is -3 on a fresh full hop, perfect bear. That you're not going to get -3 every time, but that's still crazy on a disjoint, right?
Yeah.
And I think, especially back then, well, one, everyone already knew how to like generally 2-frame Cloud, right? Now, not a lot of people know this. In Smash 4, at the peak of Cloud's up B,
it was untechable.
It was untechable.
It was
right? So you couldn't do that
untechable?
anymore. So like, Cloud's
Oh, that's in
recovery
4.
got
I
exponentially
thought,
better. I think this is
that gave me a heart attack. I thought this was week 1 Ultimate. I was about to say, there's no way that Cloud's up B was untechable in week 1 of Ultimate. I had a heart attack.
this is one of the biggest aspects that was overlooked from
Okay.
Smash 4 into this game, into Ultimate. And I do think Cloud overall was obviously a better character in Smash 4, more so the toxic part of holding limit. They got rid of that, which was probably like the strongest thing, and obviously just like his raw aerials were just like ridiculous. I don't know how like that even went through. Like,
Yeah, wasn't his
like,
upper like
defending that at
frame
the
too?
range, right?
Yeah.
And I think because of Smash 4 Cloud, we have someone like Ultimate Sephiroth. They're like, okay, if we give this much range, like no activity, super slow startup, like normal lag, like he's the only character in the game that has laggy aerials, right?
Yeah, that was definitely a learning
Mhm.
experience for them, for sure.
That is because of Smash 4
Mhm.
Cloud. To this day, I believe that. I don't actually know, but that's just what I
Yeah.
think. But yeah, the recovery is a lot better in Ultimate. Directional air dodge. I think the first 6 months of the game, especially 3 to 6 months of the game, everyone was trash at using directional air dodge. We aren't just used to it, right? And even if you're a melee vet, directional air dodge into a ledge snap was never a thing. So it's like using directional air dodge into the ledge was like still unexplored. Maybe people not really understanding the timings on like how to punish it or how to do it. So it's like least punishable, right?
Mhm.
And not being able to tech at the peak of your up B was a very big deal in Ultimate. So overall, the character's recovery got a lot better, which I think improves his overall consistency. And then your main win condition is essentially back your own shield. You back your own shield. That situation is like more fucked up than Fox back airing your shield, right? Which is crazy. The only thing that Fox kind of has is like the immediate block string of like a frame 3 up tilt, but like he's got to get a little bit closer, right? So those like characters that corner pressure with back air are just so strong. So I guess moving forward, right? Or actually, I do want to bring out that Spargo did play Cloud in Smash 4. Then Spargo was still a Cloud main in the beginning of Ultimate, but kind of was like faltering. Obviously he wasn't at the point just yet. He was extremely young at the beginning of Ultimate. His first big upset, if I do recall correctly, was Void at a Wednesday night fight.
Yep.
So he beat Void's Pichu.
It was Void.
I think that I don't know like how that matchup is in general, but like Pichu obviously susceptible to die really early. So I think Spargo was just able to recover, which is pretty impressive against Pichu, honestly. So yeah, that was his first like really big W that I believe put him on the map. So and that was first year of Ultimate, and that was like before Pichu got nerfed. So like that's pretty early Ultimate. Spargo was already kind of like taking out some of these really big names with Cloud, but he kind of moved over to some different pocket characters. I remember he was just experimenting with different characters as well, but eventually got the Cloud buffs, and he just kind of went back to Cloud, then went to the Pyramithra, right? So really interesting there. Even Spargo, before the buffs didn't really have as much faith as he currently has in the character, and I guess now we can kind of transition into those buffs, right? We've mentioned the buffs and how much they really did, like faster limit charge, like by almost a second or about a second, right? The ledge snap was probably the biggest one. Up smash out of shield. This character already has an out of shield game, and I think one thing that we all know of is if your out of shield is better, all of a sudden your neutral becomes way stronger. Run up shield becomes an option, right? I think the biggest thing for Cloud and his neutral being so strong is you have the range and you have the shield. When you have both of those combined, that's when it gets really dangerous. And then but I feel like Cloud has a little bit more damage output than a character like Lucina, because Lucina also has that, right? But I feel like Cloud's up B, not as fast as Lucina up B out of shield, but the range, people don't talk about the range and how low it hits. It's incredible, right?
It's insane.
Yeah. But to be fair, the range is effectively a little bit lower because if you hit with a tipper, people can DI out, punish you on it. So it's effectively a little bit. But yeah, I totally agree. I feel like the buffs were obviously huge. I think especially the limit charge buff was bigger than people give it credit for. Because the thing about the limit charge buff is like, for one, it makes his neutral like 10 times better, because now limit charging is actually scary because he's gonna get there in no time. And two, more often than not, he's gonna have limit ready to recover if he's off stage. Whereas beforehand, it would be a little bit further away, and that difference is so huge. And a lot of good Clouds, if you look at the way they manage their limit, they actually like to have like half charge, maybe a little bit more.
Half charge.
Exactly. And then when they get put off stage, they're just gonna charge the limit. They're not gonna get gimped, and then you're basically back to like a bit of what Smash 4 Cloud had, where he had like the perma limit, and like he had a bad recovery, but he would have limit climb hazard, and he would have a good recovery if he had it active, which was always. So we're kind of back to that like era now, and it's hard to play around the charge because of his defensive game, like Charles said. Because like meta wise, there are a few things that Cloud does really well, in my opinion, that are kind of like helped by the buffs. The first one is the limit charge, right? So I feel like as the meta progresses, aggression gets punished more and more, and in a way, feinting and kind of like passive aggressive play becomes stronger and stronger, and you can force a lot of that just by charging limit. Because the other side that I think Cloud excels at in the meta is advantageous situations. Because I feel like at the end of the day, Ultimate kind of revolves around these tiny advantages that you can find, which, for example, is why Joker is so good, because Joker is amazing at finding small advantages, getting it a little whiff, and then he dashes in, one of the best dash grabs, good whiff punishes, blah blah blah, good nair. So Cloud does that with the background shield, like Charles said. You hit the background shield, -3, you're in an advantageous position. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. And the crazy thing is, he also, while doing that, negates how most people get an advantageous situation, which is through whiff punishes. So Joker tries to pressure the Cloud backer whiff. Cloud has up out of shield. Cloud has a really good rejump. Cloud has all these tools that make it hard to get an advantageous position on him, and makes it easy for him to get that advantageous position. And you have to constantly engage, because otherwise he gets limit. So in that sense, he shuts down aggressive play with Becker and up B. He shuts down defensive play with limit and just generally having Becker and the threat of limit. And because of the limit change as well as the up B change, he's actually, I'm gonna say it, he's actually hard to gimp for a lot of characters. Which I'm sorry, common chat, but it's true. Like I said, if you manage your limit, you're either gonna have limit or you're gonna have it almost ready to go, and then you recover with the up B, and like you can still beat the up B, and then afterwards he is pretty vulnerable. But like that is a good recovery. That is like a recovery that's way above average. And I feel like what Clouds have done is they're like, hey, now that, like what Bam said, right? Now that I understand the meta, I understand how Cloud can play to this meta, and they kind of realize like all this extra stuff that I'm doing, like it's not necessary. It's nice, like up tilt is a good combo starter and it's good for pressuring, and Nair can be safe and it can shield poke, and it can, you can do rising or a landing back or rising Nair, shield poke and be safe, blah blah. It's nice, but we don't need that, because this basic game plan that we figured out because we understand the meta just fits in it so perfectly, and that in turn, if you want to talk like player side, allows a player like Sparkle to focus more on the player versus player aspect, because Cloud's easy as hell. Like the character,
so
is really simple to pilot, which allows him to just focus even more on like the player versus player side. I feel like that's kind of like my opinion of Cloud is like, I don't think the character is like that good. I wouldn't put Cloud in top tier. Let's put it that way. I think he's like a solid high tier. I think he's like upper end of high tier. I think the things that make him good is mostly like, hey, he's easy to pilot. His game plan fits in the meta. You don't really have to change it much based on the matchup, and like you don't make mistakes with Cloud because he's so simple. And if you compare it to something like Byleth, if you make a mistake with Byleth, like it's very easy to make mistakes with Byleth, and you're in a whole lot of trouble. But Cloud, in that sense, has a lot more of a like a buffer.
So
Yeah,
you think the human side is what makes Cloud strong and relevant at the moment. But like just Cloud as a character, if we take a view into like 5 years into the future where the player skill it gets upped a little bit, all of a sudden you feel like he kind of like falls off. Like
he's still
it as
good.
a character.
Yeah, and I feel like every character has like this arc where like when a character becomes like meta, they do really well, and then counterplay catches up afterwards. And you always see that. So any new character always does really well, and then they fall off a little bit, and then they settle into their rightful place. And Cloud in this moment is at that peak because like, who knows how to play against Cloud? Because the only like, okay, I don't want to say this because it's not like a straight up like objective statement, but as far as I can, like, what comes to mind, Spargo is the only top level Cloud doing it this way.
Correct.
So in that sense, like, how are you going to learn the Cloud matchup? So most players going into that matchup aren't going to be as prepared for it as they could be, which is going to make Cloud look better than he does. And then Spargo getting to play a simple game plan, right? He gets to abuse all of those weaknesses because it's not like you're counterplaying him in a complex way. The counterplay is just as simple as playing Cloud in a lot of ways, which is also why I think he's more likely to fall off. But Spargo is like a step ahead because you're having to adapt to him.
So, from my perspective, Spargo is more so the second generation of Cloud, because I would say that Cola was actually the original innovator. And I think that this relationship is best examined if we actually look at the progression of the Wi-Fi community, especially during like early quarantine. You can see how these two players have steadily become basically the apex predators of the online community. And like, I'm pretty sure Spargo is back-to-back #1 on like the world Wi-Fi rankings, as an example. There's a pop bonus event online every other week now where Spargo is consistently first place in that. And the level of consistency, especially for Wi-Fi, I don't think is a coincidence. And granted, he's doing it with multiple characters, but Cola was doing it before him, and both of them have used Cloud to do so. I was talking with one of the other players who consistently is up there, and I talked to him specifically about Spargo, and he said, well, I don't really get it. He just kind of spams attacks, but he spams it where I want to go. And even though I see it, I can't really do anything about it because he just knows where I want to be, and then there's a sword there. And so I think that what sets Cola and then Spargo apart, what Cola learned about Ultimate, that Spargo has learned since then, is that understanding positioning, understanding that if you don't allow your opponent to take an advantageous position with Cloud's movement, there's not a large number of characters in the game with movement stats who are better than Cloud's. And the ones who do generally don't have swords, which means that if you preemptively put out a sword where you think they might go to stop you, then you're going to essentially condition them and tell them this is a no-go zone. I'm sorry, I can't let you go here. I'm whiffing an aerial here right now. And so once you have that, once you set up, at the beginning of every single Spargo set that I've seen in recent memory, usually you're going to see him putting out whiff aerials that are retreating. He's going to kind of set up that safe base. And then from there, he's just suddenly going to jump out at you, and he's going to jump in with the back air once he has conditioned you to think that he's going to be passive. And this usually only takes like 1 or 2 interactions. And so his recognition of when his opponent is primed for him to go in this way is what sets him apart from every other Cloud in the world, I'd say. But the actual understanding that there is a tension between limit charge and setting up your fort, you can't do both. You have to pick one or the other. And I believe Cola was the pioneer who decided, you know what, it's more important that I set up my foundation and then I punish with limit charge. And so there's a concept in, I believe it's Melee Fox, that is the poison air syndrome of him using short hop lasers to go ahead and not actually force the opponent or zone them in any way, but it acts like it does. Because what you'll see is if Fox starts short hopping his lasers, people are going to run into him anyways, even though there's no physical mechanic that is forcing them to run into him, because they just feel compelled to do so. And so in Smash 4, I believe the premier usage of limit was to punish people for not coming in. In this game, you're allowing him to set up that base so that he can hit you, and then once he hits you in a place where it's not safe for him to attack you, what the Clouds learned is, I'm not going to triple down on this combo and try and like double jump up air at you. I'm going to charge limit, and then I'm going to full hop up air you once you reach that point. And so they're maintaining a tighter hold on their positioning when they do reach advantage. Like they're not extending on their juggles. They're making sure that you fall into their up airs, that they're not trying to catch their up air into you. So they're essentially taking the mindset that they guarantee that they have a first step, and then they're going to advance from that first step to take a second step, and then they're going to not take the third step, and they're going to have the discipline to stay at that second step once they force their way in. And they'll either retreat back out to the first step if they think that things are no longer advantageous, or if they do get the advantage, then they stay there and they penalize you for not trying to attack them from disadvantage, which is, if you did not know, if you are off stage, it is not a good time to start attacking a Cloud. And so, but even top level Ultimate players, you'll still see, will try to attack Spargo preemptively because they're seeing him set up the fort, and so they'll try and squeeze in before he can set up the fort after. Exactly. Yeah. And so they don't want Spargo to ledge trap them, so they'll attack they'll use up their remaining defensive resources to attack at him, and you'll see him turn this into some very unique punishes. And this is part of the reason like why his forward air spike setups work so much, is because people will specifically be preparing to try and counter him for setting up a base, and they're just putting their hand on the button instead of the air dodge, so they're not planning to escape him, to just attack, and so he just strikes out. And it almost looks like a true combo sometimes, and granted sometimes it is a true combo, but even if it's not, it'll still work because his expectations, he is a master of managing his opponent's expectations.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man, absolutely. That's the one thing I really, really love about Spargo. Yeah, like you said, Tony, it is a really big thing that, like, you know, after we kind of recognized how movement is in the Ultimate, and understanding how important that drift can be in tandem with a lot of these aerials being like exponentially more safe. Like even like now that of course other characters can dash dance, like essentially like Cloud could do that in Smash 4 because his like stuff like was so insane, like his dash was so insane for literally no reason. Like he was literally like the precursor to what this game was, right? But even now in this game it's still insane, right? And especially when you are talking about like characters with like, you know, these disjoints, right? With these sword like aerials and normals, right? So it is very interesting to kind of see that, and where people are recognizing where it's like I can have that drift in a game where it's like that much harder to whiff punish in the first place. It's like I have that, and I actually have an out of shield in a game where other characters didn't have this out of shield, right? And like just people seeing more value in all this thing overall. And you start to realize there's some of these things that weren't necessarily as good because of how Smash 4 was, right? And how shield was more powerful and certain mechanics and stuff too, whereas this character now has an out of shield game in a game where most characters don't have that great of an out of shield, has this great movement, has these disjoints where like yes there's some characters that have speed and they have the disjoints, but they can't do the aerial drift really like how Cloud can. And even then they don't have the safety on a lot of these aerials in comparison to Cloud. Like Cloud across the board, his aerials are pretty safe, you know, outside of Dare, you know, like it's pretty insane. Like even like, you know, the Nair and stuff too, like you'll see people jump like, oh, I'm gonna jump Nair and I'm just gonna fade away into oblivion and you're not gonna be able to get to me in time, but you're gonna try, and then I'm gonna shield and up B you or do whatever it may be, right? And so Cloud just has those like options that a lot of these characters now all of us kind of come back to recognize, like, wow, well this is actually really, really strong. And to your point, what you were saying, Ramsey, like the character is fairly simple game plan, right? And that means you're not allocating so much like mental dexterity to do what you need to do for the win, right? You can focus on these other things. You have these certain tools that are just really, 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 really good that the people have to respect, and you know it's easy for you to execute, so you can just spend time focused on what the counter strategies need to be based on what your opponent is doing, and that just makes it very, very valuable. And I think it's no mistake. It's like, obviously Spargo is an incredible player, obviously Cole is an incredible player, but like we're starting to just see that like Cloud just has a really airtight game plan all over, right? In ways that he can somewhat deal with camping, because people have to respect the power of his limit, and then at the same token is able to pressure, and also be in those situations where it's kind of boxing, where you have to respect the shield, when most times in this game you don't have to. Most of these characters, like all you need to look out for is like, how do I challenge their dash back? How do I get them for trying to dash back in these certain situations? But Cloud's chilling. Yeah, I can be in shield, and then afterwards I can flicker a shield, and you don't do anything. Oh well, let me just nair away, or like I can just bear away, and I'm good. There's no way in any world that you're going to be punishing me here, and that's just such a like, to have that all-encompassing game plan is just so strong, where a lot of characters are like, they don't necessarily have that, right? Like there's a lot of characters, like we're seeing right now, there's more value in these characters that can kind of do a little bit of everything. And even though Cloud is not to the same stature as some of the top characters that we see in the game, he still follows that kind of route where he kind of has this game plan, a general game plan that he can utilize in any kind of like situation and be solid, right? And that's like very, very important. And of course, I know you said the best buff he got was limit, but clearly his best buff is his Omni Slash. Dude got he got a new Final Smash, bro.
You got a super.
He got a new Final Smash, dude. Who got that, dude? Only Cloud. That's crazy. That's wild.
Yeah, the new Final Smash. It's crazy. He had multiple buffs to his recovery, if you think about it, right? The ledge snap and the limit charge. Multiple.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
multiple
saying.
buffs to his recovery, which is like was already like upgraded from the previous game. You know what I'm saying? And like Spargo's recoveries are absolutely insane. Obviously the one at Summit where he, hurtbox shifted with the side B.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if Spargo actually knows if that like shifts the hurtbox up. I don't know. Like sometimes you just
It was
like
definitely. It's like the stall,
because
right?
the stall, right? Obviously the
Yeah.
stall, but like I don't know if he knows that the legs come up just a little bit, because if the legs didn't come up on that side B,
He would have
you know what I
died.
mean? Like I'm pretty sure he knows though. That's the thing. Like like for me, I always want to give like the full credit to the player, right? I mean, when I'm commentating, I'm gonna just do it anyway because I'm trying to hype him up, or whatever, right? But like, Spargo knows, he's probably like the one individual on this planet that knows the most about that character, right? So it's like I just wouldn't be surprised if he knew.
I
actually haven't
literally
asked
wrote
him.
a paper on Spargo's interactions with Leo, where he specifically Leo does something similar with his up Bs, and Spargo will specifically read them and slightly like he'll IDJ instead of full hop an aerial to specifically catch like the Byleth up Bs. He's doing it on purpose, absolutely.
Yeah, and like the crazy thing is, me and Bam actually interviewed Spargo after the G4 Invitational. Obviously Spargo's a lot younger, right? So he's definitely not the most outspoken player. Like he doesn't have like a ton to say, right? And like most people when they're younger, they're a little bit more reserved.
Yeah.
But
Catch him on Miiverse though.
but I asked him,
Guess him on Miiverse.
Like, I don't know nobody.
The legend, dude.
That's him in a nutshell, bro.
That's
crazy.
so
Yeah, I
true,
asked him
dude.
about- he's gotten coaching from YouTube King, so he definitely it's so sick when there's players that are that young that are that good, because usually when you see players that are that young and that good, they have humongous egos to the point where they won't take advice from players that are maybe older or more experienced than them but aren't as good as them, right? Like obviously like people like us, right? Like we're coaches, we're experienced, we study the game, right? Obviously we're not as good as Spargo, but Spargo can learn a
Well.
lot from people like us, right? Like that's just like factual. And like most of the time you see younger players not taking advice in those situations, because for most younger players they feel like, oh, if you can't beat me, you can't give me advice. That's like generally what most younger players think, right? But Spargo, gets coaching from a lot of other players and a lot of other coaches as well, and he's mentioned Mewtwo King before, right? So obviously a very experienced player / coach. So that's really sick to see, right? And with that, and he even said that he like studies the game and stuff like that. A lot of younger players don't watch VODs or whatever, right? Like they'll just play the game to play the game.
Yeah.
But he's like studying and all this stuff, and I 100%. Oh, go ahead.
No, I actually saw a tweet from him a while back that someone linked to me. Because I have like a Discord and people like we talk about improvements, stuff like that, and someone's like, "Yeah, Spargo posted a tweet. I think it was in response to Supergirl Kells, because Supergirl Kells was like, how did you get so good?" And Spargo was like, "Yeah, I basically whenever I would like lose on Wi-Fi, I would go back and I would like write down what I was doing that was going wrong and what they were doing that was going well." And then he said like I played a lot with Leo, so I got a lot of examples of me doing things wrong, as well as a lot of examples of what I should be doing right. And I was just like, yeah, this is basically what I've been telling you guys. If you just like deliberately reflect on what is going on and you make choices that have a reason, you can iterate on those reasons, which is what Spargo is doing. And then you can be wrong, but if you have a reason for being wrong, you can improve a lot more easily than just like you
Right.
said, putting hour after hour in. So like after reading that, I was like, yeah, it makes sense that Spargo got this good. So
At such
yeah,
a
I just
young
want to
age.
add. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
crazy. That's such
Yeah.
a good mentality to have. It's insane.
Yeah, there's so many people at that age that are just like trash at that, right? And I mean, even some of these players that we've seen here, some strong players who maybe have a potential to hit that break into that top 10. There's so many of them that we've seen that just have really poor mentality. Oh, I'm the worst in the world. Oh, today I'm the best in the world. Y'all suck, suck my nuts, blah blah blah. Something ridiculous. But like, yeah, it's amazing to see from Spargo from the onset. He's been someone who's been very dedicated to the craft and understands like, okay, let me go back, watch, figure out things, rinse and repeat. Let me see here. Oh, this worked better. Let me go back. Even when I win, I'm going back because there's something there. Maybe I could fix, do better here. Why was I nervous here? And just, I remember too. Even he was talking about. I'm trying to think of when we talked with him there. This might have been at Summit actually too. Um, you and I, Charles, we had talked with him, right? Remember when we had talked to him? We talked to Leo, and then we also
Right.
talked
This
with
is at Ultimate
Meister,
Summit
right?
3. Ultimate
Right.
Summit 3. Yeah.
And then I did talk to him for a little bit, like individually, and he was just
Yes, Ma. Alright. Hold on, guys. I'll be back. Alright, sorry about that. Uh-oh, you guys.
These mushrooms make you feel better.
Sorry, you guys. Just had to do something real quick. Oh no, are you serious? It restarted me. Oh, where was I? Dang it. Point of reaction, how strong is Cloud? I don't know where we were. I don't remember where we were. Dang it, dude. I wish I knew where we were. Where did I go from here? $36, 20. Okay.
About that at all, right? And I mean, and dude, this was like, this is before, like, we talked about the infamous, right, the double jump air dodge that he did right against Leo, right? And then, like, but it's like that's stuff that he's been always consistently thinking about and like focusing on, and didn't have to be that moment for him to recognize that. He's always been trying to understand himself in that way and break down himself in that way, and that just takes another level of individual, right? That takes someone who's really trying to be successful, right? That's the kind of mindset that you have to have, where you're understanding that you're going to have your failures, right? And you need to learn how to, they talk about all the time, failing forward, right? Being able to see what's going on, my issues, my struggles, where are my shortcomings, how can I adapt here, how can I be better, who can I learn from? Because it doesn't matter how great I see at myself. Yes, I am a talent in this game that very few people have seen, but there's so many people to learn from, right? There's so many people I can take from and apply it, and thus I can become better. And it is something, I mean, I'm sure I can speak for all of us, man, especially for you guys, because like I still see myself more of like a analyst. Obviously I've done some coaching and stuff in the past as well, but I feel like more so as a person, right, I'm more of an analyst. But I know for you guys, like coaching people in general, right, whatever it may be, like even outside of Smash, like that kind of mindset is such a beautiful thing to see, because that's someone who can make it, right? That's someone who can make something of themselves in life when you have that mindset and you are actively applying it day in and day out. So I mean, it's just incredible to see from someone like that, so young and just making it happen.
Yeah, and
it's crazy because I think you don't really stumble upon that mindset. So it kind of goes back to what Charles said. It shows that he got advice and he took it to heart, which I think, like, if someone can do that, like internalize advice and not just like follow it, but try to understand how does this relate to me. That to me is a sign of someone who can make it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Agreed.
Just one of the best mentalities at such a young age. I think there a lot of things like fell into place for him, as well as like seeing Leo kind of like laying out the ground plan, and like I feel like Spargo had to have just like has learned so much from Leo, right? Just in terms of, I think, like mentality, role model, like even just like the characters they play are pretty similar in terms of strategy and stuff like that, right? Sword character and stuff like that. So that's really sick to see. I really want to bring up Tony's point where just like the positioning. I think so a lot of top players actually ask me like, dang dude, like what makes Spargo so good? Like I have to know, because like I want to beat him or whatever, right? And I'm like, dude, it like for me it's tough because I obviously used to coach Void and Tweak, so I used to like hours of studying top level play.
Alright, hold on a second, guys. I'll be back. So it's gonna take. Sorry.
Other stuff with like Beast Coast and content and stuff like that, so I don't have as much time to like kind of put into that. And I was actually really curious myself, but I think what Tony said, I think that really nails it in the coffin. And even when I think back on how Smash 4 Cloud played, right? Smash 4 Cloud, when you ledge trapped, you played more forward. If you didn't know, Smash 4 Cloud had a very fast grab, which was broken because when you hold on to limit and you have crazy fast tomahawks, Smash 4 Cloud, I think, I mean, this is going to sound kind of whack, but I think Smash 4 Cloud was harder to play because you had perfect pivot as a movement option. You had to be like, you didn't have to be, but you had the option to be a little bit more offensive with fast fall grab, right? And to ledge trap with like either linger aerial or shield by normal get up, because you would just grab normal get up, right, with a very fast grab. Or you could lay down meaty auto cancel dare, right? So his ledge trapping was a little bit farther forward, and in this game it's very different. Cloud has a shitty grab in this game, so you kind of see Spargo's play, like he still grabs you, but Spargo puts so much focus, and this is why I think the way he studied the game makes so much sense and why he's good, is because his decision making is very good in the spots that matter, and with Cloud it's a very specific spot, right? It's at the corner. Now, I kind of want to bridge this. I want to talk about his like just positioning in general, but I want to bridge this into another conversation later. But his win con is back airing your shield just in general, whether it be in neutral, but in the corner is where he gets the kills and stuff, right? And he knows exactly how players feel when they're getting hit by back air in the corner or just being cornered by him in general, right? So he knows how to set up like the threat of back air, the situation after the back air actually connects. He understands those two situations extremely well, and he knows how players feel when they're in that situation. He can pick up on it really quick. He understands like the human element and like the general options to get out of those situations, right? He understands them so well. He plays like I've never seen a player play around burst options in the corner as well as Spargo. It's immaculate. Now, I will say Cloud is probably one of the best corner pressure characters in the entire game, right? He's very privileged in a sense where, and like I guess this will be later on too, but I think he's top tier. And one of the big reasons is he can hit your shield and not care about your shield if it's like a space back air, right? But you can't. You have to care about his shield and the range and frame data. He's one of those characters like he's like so privileged in so many departments, right? Where it's just like, oh, I can hit your shield, but you can't hit mine, right? Like it. Now, like he has to establish the space. It's not for free, right? It's not like he can just like run up and like nair like a fox or something like that, right? There has to be some kind of space established and stuff like that. But the way he just positions in general in all these like very important kinds of situations like the corner, and even because Cloud has like a shittier grab, the way Spargo plays is just, I'm going to corner pressure you. He doesn't have to ledge trap you. He just stands by roll. And whatever ledge option you do, it doesn't matter. He doesn't have, like, why should he move forward and ledge trap unless he has limit, right? Like, run forward shield with limit makes sense. But he pretty much, like, stays back and he's like, I'm going to guarantee my corner situation because I'm so good at it. And he just understands the positioning around that. And, like, even if you look at all the situations where he clutches out, like, into fair spikes or whatever, where is it? It's in the corner. You know what I mean? Like, he's clutched out so many games in that spot, and his understanding, like, just general positioning-wise, is so immaculate. So, like, that, to me, that's what makes Spargo so good, and I didn't even realize that until, like, Tony brought it up. It makes so much sense in balance with, like, the character he plays, and the crazy thing is, too, since the strategy isn't like crazy complex, right? It's more so like Ramses said, he gets to play the player more, right? Like you get to play the player and you get to focus more on like how they're feeling in these specific situations, since it's not hard to execute. Now, again, I'm going to say this as a disclaimer because I've been roasted for this so many times, I don't know why. Just because I say something's easy, I'm not saying like the player is not that good. Like, obviously Spargo's a phenomenal player. He's one of the best, now making an argument, possibly the best player in the world, right? Obviously, I'm not going to strip that title away from Leo just yet. He's been the best player for 3 years, chill, right? But yeah, like it's crazy how good of a player he is, and like with Cloud, he's able to hyper focus on these, like his strength, which is positioning and understanding how players feel in these very specific scenarios, and because of that, he gets to put more mental effort into like understanding like how the player feels and doing it extremely fast. Spargo doesn't give you enough time to think about that, and he also knows this, right? And it's something that him and Light are similar in a sense, is they play so fast that like players make decisions differently depending on how much time you give them to make the decision. And I think that's something that, like, when someone
Void
says,
is really good at that.
Yes, Void is
using
extremely
that.
good at that.
Yeah.
Yes, where he's just like, well, you would normally do this, but like I'm doing this, and I'm also like making these pump fakes like very quickly here. So like you're gonna instead do this, right? So speed, I feel like some players kind of just, or like some people will say like, oh yeah, they play fast, but they don't know what that entices to the strength of the player, right? So
Yeah.
I guess the next thing I want to talk about, like, what are your guys' thoughts on like how fast Spargo plays the game?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm glad that you like brought that up because that's something that Emil was going to say too. Like we were talking about even like at Summit, right? For like that was one of the biggest things Light was saying when he was going up against Spargo. He's like, dude, I would rather play Leo right now because ultimately, like we all know Leo's good, but the thing for Light, he was just saying like Spargo just plays so fast, and it's like he plays fast and he knows how to cover the spaces, like, and so he knows how to counteract other people too if they're trying to try to rival his speed, right? And that's like one of the biggest things. And like you said, like when you are playing fast, when you don't give someone time, it's just they're not going to be able to think of all these options, right? When you don't give people time, a lot of these feints that you do just become that more powerful, right? Those subtle like shifts that you do, right? It's just easier to pull a player on a string when they're in a situation where they can't sit back, zoom out, and recognize the totality of what's happening, right?
True.
And go ahead where they can like pick their poison, so to speak. And that's how he gets people in certain situations. Like he's just so good at that. And obviously it's funny too because it's like he has Cloud in situations where Cloud is like he's fast, but the biggest thing is like he has a lot of really good solid options because of his shield being good.
Yes, Mom. All right. Sorry about that, guys.
Characters don't have a good uppy out of shield in tandem with being able to attack your shield like that. I mean, like you look at, for example, people talk about Bale out of shield or Game and Watch out of shield, right? But those characters, like you look at their aerial and their toolkit, they're not pressuring you on shield like that, right? They're not really doing anything there. Like, yeah, Bale is like maybe okay, I'm gonna do like an ABK or something like that, right? Try to get you there, but it's like after that happens, like that's the end of the time, right? That's the end of the turn or whatever, right? Where it's like Cloud can go and like actively swing on your shield, do bears, do multiple bears, hold shield, do up B, whatever, right? So it's like you have to focus on all those options that that character has there, where it's hard to whiff punish this character. This character's weaving in and out. They throw out these feints, and you have to do it quick time, right? You get a pop quiz every second because this guy is going at you.
No
at
slow motion. Quick
yeah,
time
no
event.
slow
No
motion.
slow
Yeah,
motion.
quick time event only. That's all he does, right? That's all he does, and it's like it just
It
gets
is
you,
true.
and eventually you just like you're gonna crumble, right? Eventually you're gonna crumble as just that's just a natural thing, right? And or Sparta goes with the Aegis, and then he's like, let me just like I'm not gonna have as much of like the counter option with the shield and stuff, but it doesn't matter because I'm just like 20 billion times faster, right? And then it's like all of a sudden in those.
Yes, Mom. Alright, y'all, give me another minute. guys. Sorry about that.
moments where I'm super fast and you hear something, like you just feel like, you got to do something. But guess what? You guessed wrong because I didn't swing. I just changed into Pyra, and now I'm daring you and you're dead, right? Or like you thought you were out of range, and so you did something really quick, and nope,
Yes.
I got you.
We got a bottle of milk. You should use that first.
Where?
It was in the refrigerator where you went and got the container.
I did the right switch, hit you with fair, you're dead. And he's so good at that, right? He's so good with that overall with when he is utilizing Aegis. But it's crazy too that he's able to apply a similar kind of game plan. That's his original
Brought the bottle of milk in earlier.
game plan, right? With his Cloud, because it's like he understands the threat of him having that strong shield game and how that stunts people's like movement, and then they just got to deal with that. And they talk about it all the time in any fighting games, right? Like if you're in the corner, man, if you're in the corner and you're just keeping pressure there over and over, eventually you're gonna fold. It doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter how great your defense is, you're gonna fold. And he just recognizes that, and he's just so good at just playing solid and just being at that right space in your face and putting all those hitboxes everywhere, make you freak out and just staggers you, man. It's crazy.
People want to play the game, and then you get put in a situation where you cannot play. You're gonna try to play somehow, and that's where Spargo is.
Yeah.
I think personally, in terms of his speed, a lot of it has to do with simplification. So I think like ideally, like anything that you get good at is a matter of simplification. That's why we have beginner's luck, because when you start doing something, you don't think about like let's say you're like a month 2 Joker main. That character is hard as balls because you're considering all these different things and you're playing around your opponent. You're like, what option is good, right? It is very complex and your decision making is slow. So you kind of have like you start off playing Joker, you go fast, you do what feels right, and then it gets more and more complex. And then you're at like the peak of complexity, and then when you start understanding it, you can start to simplify. So simplification is optimization, right? And I think for Spargo, like having a character that's naturally simple makes it easier to optimize. Plus, having the meta be a bit more developed also helps you optimize even more because there's more options that you can just disregard. So like what Tony said that I think is very relevant is he uses limit to punish someone for not interacting, even in advantage. And like just having that factor and how that influences the neutral is very different in this game as compared to something like Smash 4, right? So people have to figure it out, blah, blah. Now we know, now limit is buffed, shit's broken. And the story, right? So that simplification, in a lot of ways is kind of like, I don't want to say complete, but it's very far along the curve for Spargo. And now the thing is, I kind of draw it as like a straight curve, but there's kind of the thing that we talked about before, where like if someone develops a counterplay, characters often kind of like drop again. That's kind of like the second layer of complexity, right? So the initial complexity is figuring out how to play your character, and then you kind of simplify from there. And then as your opponent learns counterplay, you kind of get like another layer of complexity as you have to like understand your character, not just in the context of your own character, but in the context of the counterplay that your opponent has. And that is where I want to see Spargo go towards, because I feel like this fast playstyle, like part of the reason why it's so effective is because people aren't as fast with the way they're counterplaying it. So in that sense, I think a lot of the speed, like I'm not saying it's fake, but I'm saying like it's not ultimately proven yet.
Right.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be a permanent thing, right?
Exactly.
Unless the character is like Fox, where it's like, well, my character is
You're
just
both fast,
faster than you, right? Like I think Cloud is also quick, but like Cloud should not be that much faster than all these other characters, right?
And you can actually see it in Leo. So something we talked about in the Byleth for Sephiroth episode was ways to counterplay Byleth. And if you compare the way Leo played at Summit and the G4 Invitational to when we talked about Byleth back then, he has slowed the fuck down. And it's not because he wanted to, it's because people are faster with the counterplay. So that's a lot of what I'm trying to see out of Spargo. So for example, something that has been developing a lot in the meta because of Leo is counteracting full hops. So people are reacting to full hops and swatting you out of a full hop, which makes it less of like because it kind of is like a spot dodge. You jump over the hitboxes, you come down with your own attack. It's kind of like right? Yeah. But since Leo has been doing it, people are reacting more to full hops and kind of like shutting down the pressure afterwards, which makes it less of like a reversal option. And I feel like a lot of what we're seeing right now is people trying to do that against short hops more and more and more, which is hard to do against a lot of meta characters like Joker Nair. You cannot do it against hits. Pikachu aerials, they're super lasting. Roy has 2 hits on his Nair, you cannot do it against it. But again, something like Cloud, who doesn't have a 2-hit aerial, who has to either land or do it rising, or like somewhere in between, of course. But like it's not, you get what I'm saying, right? It's not like a Fox Nair. It's not like a Roy Nair. Like there's a lot to be gained out of, for example, like, you know, counter playing short hops on reaction. And the awkward thing is, like, you cannot react and beat it because it's too fast for that, and that's why the backer is good. But you can react and deal with it. And there's a lot, like, for example, counterplay in that regard, you can see some development in it. I think Light was trying to, like, catch on to it throughout the grand final set, but it's hard, right? Because you're not used to it. And that's where I think the speed is kind of an important thing to think about, in the sense that where does it come from? And I think it comes from a little bit of, well, Spargo, again, having an advantage because of how well he developed his character, and how well the meta has developed, and how he grasps that development is really impressive. But also a little bit his opponents not being ready yet. And I think part of that kind of ties back to the buffs as well, where because Cloud was so unknown before, we didn't see him, and now that the buffs are back, it's not just Cloud, it's Cloud, but in a different way than what we were used to. So if you think back to what we talked about before, Salt 1, right? Like you can have a lot of experience against Salt 1. It's not going to prepare you for how Cloud works now. So he's essentially a new character in a lot of ways.
No legacy knowledge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like there's some, but yeah.
Not
So-
a lot. Yeah.
So since Ramses is being so practical, I'm gonna wear the theory hat for this.
Okay.
Oh, tinfoil hat
This is
on.
your first time. This is your first time. Usually you're the pragmatic one and I'm the theory guy.
I know it's a comfortable hat, honestly.
All right. Yeah. No, I kept it warm for you.
So, I'm actually going to suggest that Spargo is also responsible on the other end of the candle. So he is simplifying things, but you need to understand that in any given minute of any given game of Smash, there are upwards of 7,200 decisions possible. And this is because every
That's a
second
big-ass
there
number.
are
Yeah.
every second there are 60 frames, 60 screenshots in which you can look at this picture and say, well, what is the best thing I could do in this picture? And sometimes what I'll do with people is I will actually take still images or screenshots and I will show them like 10 frames apart and say, what happened? What do you think is going to happen? And what do you think are the best choices for each player? And something you need to understand, we've discussed how Spargo is a master of expectations. The reason I say 120 and not 60 frames is because Spargo is paying attention to what the other person expects. He is empathizing with and reading their expectations and their decisions based on what he thinks that they are perceiving it. So the reason players don't, and the reason that there's always going to be a player limitation on the game, is because it is not physically possible for you to make 7,200 decisions or reasons in a minute. And that is because you are not even going to realize through input delay and act on those and then normal human limitations until roughly 20 frames of that, which means every third option or every third screenshot, you're going to actually be able to act on that. So not 2/3. Yeah. So you get to make about 3 decisions a second if you push yourself. And so what Spargo does is he basically makes these decisions ahead of time. Like this is where you can go in game, you can look at yourself and you can ask, well, if theoretically my opponent is on the ledge and they do a ledge hop fair, where are they going to be on stage? What do I want to be able to do and where am I going to be? Because a lot of times you'll see people will like put out an aerial from the ledge, they'll end up in the corner, and then their opponent will put out a ledge aerial, and then they'll get crossed up, and then they'll do a nair out of shield, for example, and then the opponent gets sent to center stage. Bam mentioned that Spargo has a very Street Fighter understanding of positioning, despite lacking that background. And one of the things that you learn in Street Fighter is it is worth taking a hit to get out of the corner.
Yeah.
Spargo understands, and if you watch his matches, one of the things that he massively outskills his opponents in is his defense. You will see him get hit, sometimes you'll see him get comboed. You're going to notice these combos tend to not end up with him off stage. They're going to end up with the opponent finishing their combo, trapping him, They cover his air dodge, everything hits him. It looks like they just covered everything, except if you just skip forward and don't pay attention to, they just hit him 5 times, and look at it, you're going to notice, they hit him 5 times to put him at center stage, and they're in the corner again. Wait, what? Who really won that exchange? Like, the percent is definitely on Spargo, but where the line of causality is going to end up with Spargo controlling the stage and the opponent in the corner, regardless of who initiates the hit, because he plays around his opponent's expectations so thoroughly. Exactly. And so he does this by playing ahead, and then something else he does to augment his experience and make it much higher than what it should be based on his age is he studies other sets. I was actually watching Gluttony versus Spargo at the G4 Invitational that you guys commentated excellently. Thank you for your service.
Hey.
Nice. Yeah, it was sick.
So in that set, there's a specific point where Spargo goes for a back air, and he had actually indicated that he was going to go for it ahead of time, and I guess Gluto didn't notice the tell, but he goes for a back air, essentially feints and goes out early so that the back air doesn't come out completely, so that Gluto perfectly times a ledge fair to counter hit that back air, except because he put it out, it auto cancels and does not have the full, I believe it's like 8 frames of landing lag on that back air, and then he shields the fair. Gluto also understands the importance of this positioning. Spargo, and then Spargo up smashes. Gluto double jumps
Spargo up smashes.
and gets hit by the up smash. And so the moment Spargo went for that back air, he was planning to up smash 3 decision points ahead against Gluttony. So he wasn't trying to hit Gluttony on the ledge. He wasn't trying to hit Gluttony from the ledge. He was trying to hit Gluttony after he left the ledge, got on stage, and then left that point and hit that 3rd place. And that was always the plan. And so that's essentially what Spargo is doing. But the point that I'm getting at here and why this relates to his experience is that I thought to myself, hey, I've seen this before. And I've seen this before from a very excellent Mexican player against Gluto. And I remembered nearly 3 years ago at VCA where Gluto first beat Leo. Leo's Joker specifically. Leo went for that exact same back air, shielded towards center. Gluto fared that shield, crossed up the shield, and then he Joker up smashed out of shield to KO Gluto and bring back a stock. And it stuck in my mind because it was such a beautiful setup, and led to this point where I realized, oh hey, Spargo used that exact same setup from a 3-year-old set.
Yeah, you're like an hour late.
Spargo and Gluto are a ocean apart. This is not something Spargo would have acquired from playing against Gluto, although to be fair he could have because they had played at Summit that weekend prior. I think it's a lot more likely that Spargo actually studied Leo versus Gluto, a completely unrelated set to any of the characters that he played when he would have watched it, and he just studies other players, other matchups. He acquires these experiences, he simplifies these decisions, and a bonus of simplifying things is that those 20 frames that it takes you to perceive and make a decision, once you simplify these, make them chunkier so that you're like, well, I don't have to press up and A to get an up smash, and you're just up smash. Once you reduce those decision points, your decisions become faster.
Exactly.
And so I think something I personally do when I analyze matches, I usually analyze them basically frame by frame. And part of the reason I do this is because I like to pay attention to what people's response times were, to know whether things were reads, whether or not it's physically possible for them to react to something. Spargo's is, even for an average high-level player, I would say that his reaction time is roughly 80% the startup of what a high-level Smash player can be expected. So his response times are a result of him simplifying things, like Ramsey said, understanding positions and where the opponent needs to go, and making these reads, like Bam said. And then, like Charles said, he has such a mastery over the movement of the character, over the exact spots in which, oh, if I'm dropping through the platform, I can fast fall here, I can move through this point. My opponent is going to recognize those things. My opponent is going to think that the fastest way they can get off this platform is this way. And so they run off the platform instead of dropping through. And when he does run off the platform, he sometimes uses things like edge slips so that he can get in an extra back air. To quote Cola on this, as his tag for some year, was taxing. He taxes people. He puts out these attacks that are supposed to tax their positioning. He doesn't care if they hit or not because he's planning on them not hitting, and then he hit confirms so that he can choose his next position. But you're not even going to notice if you're watching this as a layman because, well, of course, Cloud didn't chase them after he back aired them at 100%. He just walked up to the ledge and positioned. What you're not going to know is that he was actually preparing to move to center because he never really left neutral. He just recognized, well, okay, it's my time to shine. So that's my perception on his skill acquisition. Is essentially it is like Ramsey said, where he's simplifying things, but he's doing through everyone's experiences. He's studying the game. He's practicing the game. He's practicing the game in avenues that other players are not practicing yet. Like I can't tell you the last time I asked a high, even top level player, like top 20 PGR player, well, have you practiced your positioning in training mode? Like Spargo probably does. And they said, why would I do that? What are you even talking about? And I'll explain the concept and I'll say, why would I do that? There's no opponent there. And I'll explain, well, you have to actually pay attention to how they would move and then press the buttons down around them. And this is a very difficult concept to
So
grasp.
Basically
not
shadow
looking at
box.
your character,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
this is, right, like because I feel like when people do like movement drills and stuff in training mode, they're like
they're
focused on their
looking.
character, right?
Yeah.
But like the true meaning of doing something like that is to look at a platform or look at the training dummy that's not moving and like because you want to emulate it as much as you can. It won't be a pure emulation of the match, but your character should be somewhat of a blur, and you should be so comfortable in moving with your character that you shouldn't have to look at it. You should have full and utter confidence that you almost don't even have to like even see the blur. You just should know exactly when and where. If we're talking like top level, obviously you're still gonna like want to see the blur to like confirm that you are not fucking up. You're human. You can fuck up or whatever, right?
Right.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
that has so much value, though. Like,
Yeah, I
it
think
has so
some-
much value when you're able to do that because, like, then at that point now, again, we talked about this earlier. It's like you are now focused on your opponent there, right? And based on how they're moving there, you can start. You're shifting your body already, or you're doing the movement that's required. You're putting yourself in the proper positions required without you having to go through this whole long mental, like this logical progression of, oh, they did something. Okay, now I need to move my character here. Now they're doing this. It's like, no, I see that, and my automatic response to that, like I'm taking it. They're the book. My opponent is the book, and they're based on their movement. I'm adjusting my position accordingly, and that's like what makes him such an incredible player, right? And I love like you were talking about, like we're talking about the idea of like essentially he does play it like a very Street Fighter-esque. Like it's funny because like you have things like the footsie handbook, right? That was made by Maj, like in general, right, for traditional fighting games, and Maj is like good friend of mine, super cool dude, and it's crazy because back in the day I really wanted to make a footsie handbook for Smash because I feel like a lot of people don't recognize like there's so many of these like iconic feints, right, and all these kind of things they do, right, that make people do. I mean, one instantly comes to mind is back in Brawl, I like my kids would do this all the time, right? Has someone in the corner, jabs them once, turns around, right? Of course, his opponent, they see the turnaround, they think he's gonna go for something or a back or something like that. They roll, he up smashes them on the roll, right? It's like that very like those iconic things that are kind of based on what these kind of feints and these threat bubbles that people see and how they
Sorry. We're back. Just went to the bathroom.
They react to that and just instantly they're focused on that up smash, right? They're not throwing out that additional feint because they understand this in itself pressures people into be those spaces, right? And I think a lot of people in Smash don't do enough study on those things. And so I love that you brought that up, Tony, because that is a very big thing. The fact that like that sequence, right, for that sequence for Spargo to get that kill with that up smash, like absolutely beautiful. And that was quality footsies. That is, like I could say, like that is quality footsies, right? And that's something a lot of times even on the higher level play we don't see people think about as much in that kind of way, right? And having those kind of like traps, right? Or those like strategies like, oh, I know this is gonna move them here, and they, I'm already 3 steps ahead, like you were talking about before. And those things are so damn beautiful, and it's part of the things that make just like fighting games and like Smash in general like beautiful, right? But not enough people do study that stuff enough, right? And you can see that the Spargo does, and those things allow you to play faster, because again, now that whole really like complex concept is now whittled down into a very simplified strategy that you have. You're like, oh, I need to kill here, this is how I get my up smash. That's it. I'm not thinking I have to do this feint and that feint. No, because I already know exactly how it's going to progress, right? Because I've seen it before. I've watched it before. I don't have to live all those lives. I can just watch the VOD and take from there, right? And that's what Spargo does, and that's what allows him to play so fast, because what you are doing, he's watched people do 1,000 times. And he knows how people act in those situations, whether they're the best in the world, whether they're, average or whatever, right? And like that is so important if you're trying to play at that speed. And if you're able to do that, I think you can continue doing so because you are paying attention to the meta as a whole, rather than just the looking from the the small lens or the tunnel focus of your own journey throughout the meta. And that's a very important thing.
I think what you both are getting at in playing fast, and I think Tony didn't use the word, but I think this is what he meant, is Spargo is really good at anticipating, which is a really hard thing to do, because it requires you to not just think about the opponent, but also think about what the opponent might be doing and why they're doing it. So it's kind of what Charles said, right? He's really good at understanding the mood or the emotional effect that the opponent is under. And that kind of leads to proper anticipation, because anticipation is like a read, but let's say I read he's gonna roll, I could charge an up smash. I could also say I read he's gonna roll, I'm gonna be ready to reactionary up smash it, and in that sense, that anticipation is still a read, and you still have to commit to it. But it's a lot harder to make that than an actual read, because there's a lot more gray area. Because a read is like it works or it doesn't. Anticipation is okay, it works or it doesn't, or he does something unexpected and I need to be ready, right? And that is again where simplification is a big thing, because if you are so familiar with your own positioning, if you're so familiar with what you want to do, you have more mental space to think about the opponent and more room to anticipate. And I think that anticipation is honestly like one of the most underrated top level skills that people don't know about, which sounds like a YouTube title. The most underrated top level skill that you don't know about. Anticipation. But it really is the case, because it's such an abstract thing, because it's kind of like predicting but not committing. It's reacting but kind of reacting. It's playing around what you want, but also playing around what your opponent wants. It's about the psychological aspect, but it's also very concrete in the sense of like, even if I anticipate this, like what am I going to do, right? So like it's like a combination of a lot of different skills, and it's like risk reward management too, because like if I'm anticipating this here, what am I sacrificing? What is the reward that I got out of it? What's the risk that, right? So in that sense, that is something that I think if I were to give Spargo like the one skill that I think he is most adept at compared to his peers, it's anticipation. And I think even more so than positioning, even more so than simplification, even more so than being solid, even more so than any of the other stuff, I think the way he anticipates situations is truly on another level. And that's where the study is like super huge, because it helps you learn like what should you be anticipating here, because you see how people like to react in situations.
He's training his observation hockey. He has the strongest
He
observation
definitely
hockey in all of the Smash.
He definitely
For
does,
sure.
and that's why he can move so fast, dude. Like, dude, yeah, 100%. He's Kata
Exactly,
Curry, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, dude, he's Kata Curry. Like, that's literally how he plays, and I love it.
So
Love it.
one thing I want to add on top of that too is now every player can anticipate, even you. You can sit there and stand by roll and
Oh my
say,
God.
if I see roll, I do up smash, I do up B, I do whatever, right? Anticipating out of shield is the most common situation to anticipate from.
Yeah.
Actually is the base of the previous Smash titles, Smash 4 and Brawl, was a lot of anticipation out of shield. How good are you at anticipating out of shield? That was the backbone of the game. Not so much in this game, depending on the character, right? Spargo is blessed that he can anticipate out of shield and have a lot of threat behind the anticipation out of shield. He also anticipates out of shield after like back air, right? You now
Yeah.
like a common situation that you can anticipate with Fox is you see light back air someone's shield low, dash back. If I see shield grab, I run up smash, right? Now, the impressive thing about Spargo, so everyone anticipates, right, especially at top level. Spargo is anticipating he has like a web of anticipation. He's got like this option, this option, this option, and the more you can anticipate at a single moment, that's really what shines, right? Because like you watch Spargo play, there's no fucking way he just like anticipates one thing and he gets that many
No,
times, right?
no
There's no
way.
way. There's no way.
No.
But he's
He's
anticipating.
puppeteering, man.
He's
Mhm.
anticipating multiple outcomes, and because he can do it at that level, he's able to have his corner pressure has that consistency. Now, another thing I want to talk about, because Tony brought up a very good, like very specific situation, which is the example that I personally hate when I fight top players, is getting punished for being good at the game. That's really fucking annoying. So Gluto got punished for being good at the game. Now, obviously, it's a very specific setup, but that only works on good players. If it was a bad player, they don't react fast enough to the back air. They don't like fully understand that situation. Maybe they're a little bit more scared and inexperienced, so they'd keep shielding, right? But that worked on Gluto specifically because he was good. Now, understanding, and this is something else that I think Spargo is very good at, or Spargo, yes, and then all top players are. You're gonna have to have this ability at top level play. But I was playing Void the other day, and it's like when I was getting pissed because when I ledge jump with Fox, it's very easy against a non-top player to ledge jump from Fox, don't burn double jump, press nair, fast fall down, and get a reversal situation because they don't react as fast as top players for the most part, right? But Void reacts to my ledge jump. Now, then I get pissed because I see like understanding what your opponent's reacting to, and then like so like I'm the one doing the ledge jump, right? I know Void is reacting to the ledge jump, and I know which point he reacts. Now, understanding that point is very, very crucial, and it's how Spargo like mounts a lot of his offense, right? It's like, okay, like because of that, I start double jumping, right? So I jump, then double jump, and then I see Void like throw out the attack, and it's like, ha, fuck you, and then I like land on stage, right? It's like, so it's like understanding like that specific situation. Now, obviously, I still just get shit on by Void in general, but like that was just an example of like I can do X against lower level players, but I can't do Y, or I can't do X versus top players because their point of reaction is sooner. Crafting, and now this is how like now we're getting into like the very deep top level play aspect of the game, but like understanding when your opponent reacts to what point of your offense is very important. He combines this with how they feel, and like he combines the point, because you can call out what they're going to do, but you also need to know when they're going to do it, right? So
And
Spargo
why,
has
their
a
intention.
yeah, and their intention behind it, right? So Spargo is very good at lapsing all of that information, and because you can lapse all that information, also knowing when to anticipate is very important, because when you anticipate, you are burning mental energy, right? So you
It's a
obviously
read, yeah.
right, you don't want to burn yourself out. So knowing when and where to anticipate is also very important, and that's why I think Spargo, it's like also incredible how much stamina he has for playing the game. Like I've seen Spargo playing like these very long brackets, and he has incredible stamina. I think a part of that goes to like Cloud is a little bit more on the simple side, but as well as he knows how to like conserve his energy, and he gets an understanding of when his opponent wants to, like when his opponent can and will react to something, right? The intentions behind it, the mood behind it, right? The on paper options, and like combines all those things. So yeah, that's just, to me, that's like very impressive.
Yeah.
Funny, one thing that you're talking about with the reaction time, there's actually a term in the American military. How I know this, don't ask me. OODA loop. It's called the OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, act. And it's kind of like the decision-making steps. So you observe, you orient, you're like, okay, what options do I have? Then you decide an option, and then you act on it. And what you can see in the top-level players is when you anticipate something, the observation becomes a lot more quickly, the orientation becomes a lot more quick as well, and then you just decide and act. So what you can kind of see in Spargo's case is that he gets a feeling. So when you hear people talk about, I understand the rhythm at which my opponent plays, I get the tempo at which he makes, that's understanding someone's speed of their OODA loop. And top level players just have a faster loop not because they react faster, but because they orient faster and they decide faster. And then the acting is kind of like, that's kind of like the technical part. And what you can see from, for example, what Spargo does is he's like, I know when you are observing something, and then I will go for a feint, pump fake, and then I'll fuck up your loop, and then you have to like deal with the new information while kind of like restarting the loop. So if you let someone do like loop, you get the kind of gameplay where it's like, oh, I'm gonna do a jump safe aerial on your shield, and then you're gonna do a jump safe aerial on my shield.
And they go back,
right?
No one's breaking it.
That's like the loop
classic.
in perfect action.
Oh yeah, I love to see it.
And then like at a high level, you get people who like put fakes while you're orienting, while you're observing, and then you kind of like get stuck when you want to decide, because by the time you're deciding, you're kind of like stuck in that loop while you're trying to start a new one at the same time, and that kind of like short circuits, and that's where they fuck you up. And what you were talking about before, Charles, where like people who play fast and put you in like an unexpected situation and then mess you up because you're in a situation you didn't expect, like what Void does, that is exactly that. It's short circuiting the decision making process, basically. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's probably one of my favorite things about the game in general too. And like what we've all been talking about, right? It's very interesting where you have this thing with just in general, right? And kind of going back to like traditional fighting games too, right? Even where it's like Justin Wong, they kind of talked about like in certain situations, like, okay, at the start of a match, you hold block here for 1 second, for like a half second, right? When you're playing against the E Honda, right? Just talking about like Ultra and stuff like that. It's like, why do you do that? Because usually in that very beginning, that E Honda is going to go ahead and they're going to go for a headbutt, right? And they're going to go for it early on. They're going to go for it. But if it does not happen, but if it does not happen in that moment, you can now move forward and do your thing. And the reason why is that, like, at that point, people tend to, that tends to be the loop, as you said, right? Where it's like, it's either that immediate one, or people tend to be like, oh, I'm going to wait and play the game first, which means that allows you to move forward because they're in their head telling themselves, I cannot do this headbutt because I'm seeing someone walk back and get a block, which gives you open time because now they've staggered themselves, right? And that's kind of like what we're, again, like what Spargo's really, really good at, right? Just has these like, airtight feints. I think Cloud as a character is actually, again, really good at doing those things. And the fact that you always got to think of his shield is another piece that you can never take away, right? From what's on your general state, right? Of like what you're thinking of, all the host of options your opponent can do in the counter strategies. You always got to think of shield, right? Which that's why it's so powerful, right? To have that. And I think there's no mistake that we see Cola and we see Spargo both like playing the Cloud in that way, right? But then they also have these characters who are like, oh, I'm gonna just be super fast and run you over, right? Aegis and Roy. But like you have the character where it's like I can still play fast, and like I'm not as fast as those characters, but I have a defensive option that's really, really powerful that you always got to think of, and that complements me to still play fast because you can't just remove those options from the plate; those are still on board, right? But it's great to see that from Spargo. Like it's so insane to see that from him consistently, and I love that he's crafted a play style where he can kind of generally play the speed and not really have to think too much. And then it's like he just focuses on those key moments there, and then that's where he puts in the anticipation. That's where he's burning that that mental resource there to make that stuff happen. But yeah, he really is someone where like sometimes it's happening fast and people just don't understand what's going on. And it funny again, like I know we're focusing on Spargo, but like I feel like I cannot just disregard Cole in that regard too, because he has that kind of same like some kind of play where like some people will see him and they're like, dude, this guy's just swinging. What's he doing, right? And it's like, no, dude, he's like this man is like putting all these feints, all this mix up, like Tony was saying before, and it's like that's leading him to his end goal, and he's doing that on purpose, right? Those swings, like it's intentional there. It's not just haha swinging that ghost, trying to look at Roy, that nothing like stupid like that. And you see that kind of same ideology coming in from Spargo as well, right? In a very airtight manner. And I love seeing it, man. I think that this kind of play, obviously it's super exciting, and it takes a lot. Like, you got to do a lot of homework to make this stuff happen, man. You got to do a lot of homework. It doesn't just like magically happen, because you really have to go through a lot of these scenarios to the point where you can really whittle down the ones that are going to be most probable, and then from there you can really craft an airtight game plan. Otherwise, it's just too much. Using the term Ramsey, you were saying, like your OODA loop, it's going to take too long for you to do these things, because you're taking in all this new information and again and again and again. So you can't really play at that speed unless you've gone to the point where you really understand what those options are going to be, what are the most probable ones, and then just immediately make the action necessary to actually get yourself the victory, right?
Oh, yeah, I agree. That's totally true. It was just such a good summation of what we talked about so far. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I guess we can. We've been going for quite some time. I guess we can close it out. Just our closing thoughts on Spargo, Spargo just in general, the Cloud meta just in general. I do agree with Ramsey's that Cloud is on a current upswing, but I do believe that the character is like in that top 20 area just for myself. I think the recovery is pretty underrated. He can do things to characters that they can't do to him. Obviously, it's like a super dumbed down, like simplified version of it. But my opinion of the character, even though it's on like a pretty huge upswing right now, I do think the character still has longevity just because of like how consistent the strategy is, right? Like I think corner pressure is so like feels more consistent than ledge trapping because there's so much like ledge reversals. There's so many characters that have ledge reversal options that it's just like, well, I mean, backer on block, I don't care if like you're just blocking there, right? Like,
backer on block is a better situation than ledge trapping someone. Charles 2022.
If it's a cloud backer, right?
Cloud backer, all right.
Yeah, and it like kind of depends on like what character's on the ledge.
No,
like,
I get you. You're right.
It's a very simple, consistent strategy, right? And when a character doesn't have to play that much different via like these different matchups, I think that signifies a like really strong character, which is why I still think Wolf is still pretty strong, because Wolf generally doesn't have to change his game plan too much depending on the character, and I think Cloud's kind of in that same boat. I actually think Cloud and Wolf are like incredible pocket characters, right? And even with like Steve on the potential come up, Cloud is one of Steve's worst matchups. So I think Cloud like stocks in general, like the characters he beats, the value in like him as a pocket character. I think the value of the character in the current meta is very high, regardless of where he's on the tier list, just because of those factors in itself. And then I also think standalone he's like pretty strong. And then Spargo, obviously, one of the harder working, if not hardest working players in the Smash community at such a young age. Super sick to see him on the come up. Such an amazing player and really shaking up this game in a good way.
So so I understand why everyone focuses on Cloud being a straightforward character. My perception of the character, just from having tracked his performance data for some time, because like Cloud for me going into the game was one of the characters I was particularly interested in, like following long term, because whenever a new Smash game drops, I'll usually have several set assumptions based on my then understanding of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I'll usually like write down what my reasoning for those assumptions are, and then like what possible things that I'll be wrong on that could disprove it. And so every single Smash game that happens, and I'm usually wrong on several things. Obviously, I'm less wrong as time goes on, and I learn more. But the whole point of this experiment is I was expecting Cloud to fall off at the start and then have a resurgence. So did get most of my guesses about Ultimate wrong. I will
Nice.
say, I was expecting Inkling to be the best character, for example.
Oh snap!
I know. Yeah,
Oh, we
yeah, I
kinda
was
messed
very
up on that.
There was a time. There
yeah.
was a
So
There was a
so
time indeed.
I'm not gonna act like, oh yeah, I always knew Cloud was great. It was more a matter of I saw Cloud, and to be fair, one of the other characters that I thought was going to be great was Sheik. So I
It's been
saw
on
Cloud,
some-
I saw Sheik. That's a future episode right there. So the so I saw Cloud, I saw Sheik coming in, I saw characters like Crom, and I was like, these characters have fantastic moving stats, disjoints. They have lots of tools that we've seen these same characters be successful with before. How could this character possibly be bad? And one of the deciding criterion that affected the decision that it did pan out, but one thing that I didn't understand while going into Ultimate is that the scaling of the overall cast affects how good a character is, essentially. So I also think Cloud is in some ways better than he was in Smash 4, but I think that the cast is so much stronger than Smash 4 was. That like even the weakest Smash 4 character would, or Ultimate character would probably be a mid tier or worse, or better in Smash 4. Whereas just like looking at the raw numbers, usually the characters as the games went on got weaker. Like attacks would do slightly less percent, have slightly lower knockback values on their kill moves, things like that. And then so going from Smash 4 into Ultimate, I specifically expected the cast to get worse, and I expected Cloud to, because I thought his numbers were better than they had been in Smash 4, that he would be a better character overall. And I simultaneously do hold that is true, but like you gentlemen have said, I think the character has, relative to the rest of the cast, is not as good. However, I cannot imagine how many characters would need to be added in order for Cloud to be a bad character. He's kind of like up there with Fox and Bayo, where no matter how bad his moveset really gets, him just having movesets and the fundamental archetype of fast character, sword disjoints, kill moves, and a spike, that you're just going to be able to adapt that into any platform fighter engine, and I think it will be a successful one. So I don't think that he's going to fall off in the future like you guys do, but I also that is my reasoning for it. It's a matter of, I think that he is a tool that very talented players can work through. I think that the players who do well with Cloud tend to have been outstanding players independently of Cloud. Like I don't think there's a single top Cloud who would fall off at all if the character was suddenly removed from the game. And I think that he's unique in there, and that maybe that is because he's a pocket character, except we don't see pocket Clouds placing at top level like we do with like Pocket Wolf, for example, where people you've never seen Wolf before but are outstanding players can pick up Wolf and just until another top player because they're ready. So I think that how he works as a character is that he is fundamentally not a character you can just pick up and succeed with at top level. I don't understand this well enough to say why, just from having seen like who we see placing at top level and what their experience with Cloud was. It 100% of the time was someone who played Cloud since Smash 4. Like I don't think there are any top Clouds off the top of my head who did not. And so like even going into Japan, like we have like Musashi, and he's an ancient Smash player. Like he's been playing since Melee, I'm pretty sure, and at a high level. So like these are very experienced players, and as we've established watching this video, Spargo, although not experienced in time, the situations that he has experienced, his learning process, accelerating that as far as it is, he's been in the gameplay situations just as many times as us veterans. So just because Spargo hasn't been around as Brawl, because he studies the game as much as he does, because he's doing it correctly and pouring lots of time into it, you see the result of his efforts. And I think that it really does shine on him. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Spargo does in the future. he still makes a significant number of technical errors. There's small opportunities for his movements, like his walking. He does walk once in a
He's
while.
a walker.
Yes.
Just once in a while, though. And I think that there are numerous opportunities where he'll overspace with a dash back. This doesn't usually come up in matches where it'll be like, oh yeah, he got hit there because he didn't walk, because he positions so far back that generally when he does make mistakes, when he makes technical errors, his opponent is not in position to punish him for it.
Right.
And so the mistakes he makes, and this is the same thing for any well played and well positioned smart sword user, I'd say at top level, you don't see them get punished for their own technical errors because of where they tend to put themselves afterward. And that's part of what is nice about a sword character. And Ramses understands this, I'm sure, where like just because you accidentally whiff a back air doesn't mean they're going to run into where you were going to fair. So yeah, people play around those spaces regardless of whether or not you press the buttons. And so even when you do make mistakes, they're not necessarily going to be capitalized on.
Yeah. I'd say
As a
like
Shulk player, I can confirm that I just swing the sword and make mistakes.
Sir,
the great
that's what we're here
sword.
for. That's
Yep.
why we play Shulk.
I was gonna say, just to like one last thing on my side, I do think that if I was willing to wager as to why we probably see more Pocket Wolf do better than a like say like a Pocket Cloud, is probably just kind of the nature of these like characters toolkits, where it's like Wolf is still a character where like Wolf can still kind of like, he can rob you, right? Like he can actually just like rob you, right? And he also has things too where it's like kind of airtight. Like Cloud, his whole toolkit is very, very good, but Wolf can do like grab you and like do my simple combo and you are at 60 now, and I get like a reset and stuff, right? I think those characters tend to be better pocket characters versus a character like Cloud, where like he has the tools to win, but it's like almost this one interaction, and then because of that I got a whole ton of damage and got you in this place. And I think that's kind of the difference of Cloud. So like that's why he's not as good as a like Pocket, but I think he's a great like secondary character, someone who's like really played that character for a time. That's an appropriate tool that you can use. But it's something where it's like almost kind of a death by a thousand cuts type character, versus like Wolf can kind of be a bit more couple like key interactions, as long as you know what to do right there. Like as long as I know I can do my throw combo and like I get damage there, and then I can shoot laser, like, you know, I can maybe be okay versus other people. And I think that's probably the difference, even though they seem somewhat similar in terms of like a character that you can pull out and really handle those matchups. But that's what I would guess.
Yeah, so I think for Cloud, I know I've been a little bit critical, maybe a bit too much this episode, because like I've been harping about like, you know, a simple character, blah blah, but I think like Spargo's an amazing player. He is undoubtedly top 5 in the world, and in my opinion, like I'm saying top 5 because, you know, like I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to the non-American players, but if you go by results, he's top 2, right? Like just straight up.
Yes.
And I think that's because he's a really good player. The point that I'm trying to make about Cloud is that I'm gonna reserve judgment until I see the counterplay develop. And it was the same for Sheik, because like the Sheik hype was there, and now Japan is better against Sheik, and you don't see the character anymore. Surprise, surprise, right? And like I don't mean to be the guy who like I knew before it was hype, because like I've been playing with Mr. R for a long time. I know how Sheik works. I know how broken she is if you don't know how she works. And I think the same is true for Cloud. I also think Cloud is like an execution check character in a lot of ways. I think most Wi-Fi characters, and then like Cloud is a Wi-Fi character in a lot of ways. But for example, something like Rob 2, they're all very execution check heavy, which is why they work good on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, you just cannot execute as well. And that all those characters that are execution check heavy, they benefit more from the opponent not knowing the matchup, because the onus is on you to be clean against them. With the recovery, with the up at a shield, with the back air, which you want to, you know, parry or barely, right? Like, it's a lot of being precise to get around Cloud, and a lot of that requires just a lot of experience. So in that sense, like, I'm not a Cloud doubter, and like I said, I think he's high tier, I think he's solid. I would place him around like Bowser in terms of how good he is, and I think Bowser's like a really solid character, as you can see with Leon performing well, Hero in Japan, etc. So I think he's a solid character. I think he's good. He's got a lot of stuff. Before I call him top tier, I just want to see the counterplay develop, especially since the character is to me a bit of a skill check or execution check. But yeah, that doesn't take anything away from Spargo. I think Spargo's amazing. I think he's amazing. But yeah, good character, very solid.
Yeah, you want to see the next chapter, the next arc development of like the meta,
Exactly.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's the great thing about this game, right? And we have no idea what the meta is, and I think that's the cool thing about Ultimate, right? Like the game's just so balanced. You know, we're 3 years in. We kind of had like 2 years or year and a half of Wi-Fi BS, but like we're kind of back. I feel like we're back on track, and like we're trying to figure out this game, right? And
Things are going fast.
yeah, I think the direction of the game is going fast, and the shouts to the top players. They're really putting in a lot of work. And yeah, I can't wait to see the meta unfold. But that's going to be it from us. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. This one was a bit longer, but I think there was quite a bit to talk about.
Good reason.
Yeah, Spargo is quite literally like changing, the top level play in like no way or in a way that no other player has done since the very beginning of the game. So it's I think there was a lot to uncover, and even just the character as well. Obviously, like Cloud's just not a super common pick, which is wild, right? So yeah, until next time, class dismissed.
All right, that was good. That was pretty good, very informative. I'm pretty much just gonna spend much time. We'll probably watch another one, a little bit more recent one, in my opinion. Like maybe difference between theory and practice. Maybe how different games can make you better at Smash. Maybe something like that. Maintain stamina and bracket, which I think is a really big one for me personally. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later because I'm gonna be doing a Mars stream. So yeah, see you guys later.